Hello, everyone. Thank you for the nice introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Annalise Lillis and the Clarke program in East Asian Law and Culture for inviting me to Cornell to give a talk. Cornell is a place of fond memories as I spent a very happy 3 months in the summer of 2004 during my sabbatical semester. I am indeed very happy to return to Cornell during the best season and to have an opportunity to talk to you about the topic I am very passionate about. I believe that the most important objective of gender policies to achieve gender equality. In Korea, the term gender policy was first officially used in the 1980s, and the government established special agencies and passed various legislation with the aim of achieving gender equality. Unfortunately, however, gender gap and gender discrimination still exist in many parts of the society in Korea today. In Korea, as you know, election of the first female president gives the impression that Koreans achieved gender equality. However, a review of major statistics for Korean society still indicated the existence of gender gap, gender bias, and gender discrimination in Korean society. The order of my presentation is as follows. First, we will review the major statistics regarding Korean women's social status, and we will see the background of gender policy in Korea. Then I will present the major accomplishments of gender policies in Korea. Lastly, I will briefly suggest the remaining tasks of gender policies in Korea. First, I will show you the social status of Korean women by using major statistics. The rate of women's participation in economic activities in 51%, which is very low comparing to that of men's participation, which is 73.8%. Also, there is a huge gap between the women's and the men's wages. The average of women's wage is only 68% of the men's average wage. The rate of female members in the National Assembly is only 15.7%, and the rate of female officials in the central government administration position is only 8.4%. The percentage of men taking parental leave is only 2.8%, which means that child caring is still performed exclusively by women. But women score high in other areas. The rate of female victims in violent crimes is 77%, and the 47.2% of aged women and are below the poverty line. The rate of women's participation in economic activities still shows M-squared curve. Women in their 30s saw the lowest level of participation due to children and infant caring. Also, women are displaced from the labor market. Owing to long labor hours to rake the day, care facilities, and the expectation that women should be the sole or primary caregiver of children. The average birth rate is also very low, 1.34 women. As a result, the combination of low birth rate and the rapidly aging population give rise to a severe social problem in Korea. Both men and women can take parental leave, but the rate of men among all parental leave is only 2.8%. Men only spend an hour, 2 minutes per day for housework and child caring, which is only 1/1 of women's. Also, this number number means that Korean men only spent 1/3 of American men's hours of housework and child caring. It's right? These members indicate that it is not easy for Korean women to achieve work-life balance, and many women end up leaving the workforce to raise children and handle household chores. Let's look at the rate of female college graduate participation in economic activities. The average of OECD countries of 81%, but Korean average of 62%. This shows the low utilization of the highly educated female labor force. Women teachers in every level of school have increased gradually. 3 out of 4 elementary school teachers are women. But the rate of women principals is relatively low, as the graph indicates. And the rate of female president of college is 12.7%. The rate of female members of the National Assembly was 15.9% in 2000. In this year, this number becomes 15.7%, but still very low. The rate of female members of local council still remains 20%. The rate of female public officials is 41.8%, but the rate of female officials of graded 4, this is highly officials, is only 7.3%. These members indicate that most female public officials are concentrated in the low-level positions. The rate of women in the legal profession is 18.5%. The rate of female judges was the highest of 26.7%, followed by 23.6% of prosecutors and 15.9% of lawyers. According to UNDP report, the gender inequality index was ranked at 27 among 186 countries in last year. According to the Gender Gap Index, which published every year by the World Economic Forum, Korea was ranked at 108 among 135 countries in last year. Among these factors, the rate of women's economic participation shows a lowest level, ranked at 116. Now let's look at the basis of legislation policies of women in Korea. In Korean Constitution, from its first enactment in 48, equality is included as a fundamental right. Article 11, Section 1 of Constitutional Law articulates that all citizens shall be equal before the law, and therefore shall be no discrimination in political, economic, social, or cultural life on account of sex, etc. This provision guarantees constitutional equality based on sex and articulates the principle of human dignity. In the Korean Constitution, there are some articles related to gender equality. Article 24 and 25 state rights to vote and to hold public office. Article 32, Section 4 mentions no discrimination in employment and guarantees of women as special labor. Article 34, Section 3 regulates the state in endeavor to promote welfare and to endeavor rights of women. Article 36, Section 1 articulates the state duty to protect individual dignity and equality of sexes in marriage and family life. Gender equality provisions of Constitution are achieved through Constitutional Court decisions. One of the most representative decisions is regarding the abolishment of Hoju based on Article 36, Section 1 of Constitution, which articulates the state's duty to protect individual dignity and equality of sex in marriage and family life. From 1958, many female public figures argued the abolishment of Hojo. After 50 years of consistent effort of many female public figures, Hojo was abolished in 2005. In addition, the veterans extra point system, which gives extra points to persons who have completed their military service, most men, in the government official entrance examination, was given unconstitutional decision based on the violation of the principle of equality, freedom of occupational choice, and the right to hold a public office guaranteed by Constitution. Currently, the number of female lawyers has increased, but it's still very low. Ewha Women's University has produced 700 lawyers as a higher educational institute for women. Ewha is the only one of all for gender law in its educational curriculums. In the Korean women legislative policies, a Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, takes a very important position. Due to the ratification, the CEDAW has been effective in Korea women legislation policies from 1985. Since the late 80s, for the implementation of CEDAW, various women legislations have been conducted, including abolition or amendment of laws which hold discriminatory provisions, legislations for the achievement of the substantial equality, legislations related to affirmative actions, legislations related to gender mainstreaming. As driving forces of such enactment of women legislation, there are increasing women's participation in workforce based on economic and political development in Korea, reinforcing women's NGOs movement that effectively publicized discrimination against women and human rights issues as social and legal problems, as well as establishing governmental unit whose mission is to promote and implement the gender policies. Now I will briefly explain the governmental unit in charge of women policies and the basic point of Korean women policies. The Basic Act on Women's Development is the basis of the Korean women policies. This act was enacted in 1905 and enforced in 1906. The purpose of this act is to promote gender equality in all areas of politics, economy, society, and cultures, and to facilitate women's advancement by prescribing fundamental matters with regard to the obligations extra of the state and the local government for realizing the ideal or gender equality under the Constitution of the Republic of Korea. This act required the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family to develop basic plans for women's policies every 5 years. This slide shows the history of government organizations which hold the primary duty to dealing with the women policies. In 18A, the second Minister of State of Political Affairs was appointed as the first public official in charge of policy of women. 1908, a special presidential commission on women's affairs was also established. As a central administrative organization, the Ministry of Gender Equality was established in 2001, which provided the overall basis of planning and implementing policies for women. Now this ministry was named as the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, dealing with policies for women, family, and youth. The basic plans for women policies is currently on its first master plan. The vision of the plan started with equal participation and equal responsibility as the first phase. The second phase is achieving practical equality for both sexes, followed by citizens' mutual society of gender equality on the third plan. The final phase is equal participation and growth. The women's movement has influenced greatly on the enactment of women-related laws. I too personally had conducted a study on the introduction of women quota system at that time to increase the representation of women in public field. The Organization of Women Solidarity for the Quota System was founded in August 1994. Over 56 women's social groups, including Korean Women's Association United, Korean National Council of Women, YWCA, Korean League of Women Voters, joined the solidarity regardless of their difference in ideology and visions. In 1994 to 2000, the solidarity strongly demanded to dominate at least 30% of women in the proportional representation list of the National Assembly and in possible winning all areas for the local parliament election. The solidarity also urged to appoint at least 30% of female representatives in government and public committees. Due to these activities, the Party Act was revised in 2000 to require 30% of female candidates in the proportional representation list. And currently, 50% of female candidates should be listed in the proportional representation list being located in every odd number. Also, the Act articulates each party's duty to make an effort to appointed to at least 30% of female candidates in the district election. Since the amendment of Framework Basic Act on Women's Development this year, the new provision that states one sex to be in the government committees should be under 60% was introduced. The legislations related to women's policies have been improved gradually with the goal of realizing the constitutional principle of gender equality. The women's governance was structured based on the effort of the government and the enthusiastic enactment movement of women's organizations. I will introduce you some of major achievements and issues of women legislative policies in Korea. As mentioned earlier, the abolition of Hoju was one of the cornerstones to speed up the movement to aim the patriarchal family law of Korea. Hoju is defined as the legal head of a family who succeeds or assists of a family for various reasons. The Hoju was a legal system which gave the direct male descendant or a son the power to be the first person to succeed a family. It represents a typical male-oriented family system that conferred enormous power to men in a family and strengthened the existing notion of preparing a son to a daughter. Some Korean women activities have sought to abolish the Hoju in the family law since 1953, and this resulted in a small amendment to limit the power of Hoju in 66 and 88, changing inheritance to Hoju to succession of Hoju system. In February 2005, the Constitutional Court ruled Hoju unconstitutional, stating Hoju violated the principle of gender equality and human dignity, and the amended civil law was passed on the Congress next month, officially announcing the abolition of Hoju after its existence of 50 years. With the constitutional ground of Article 11, Section 1, the affirmative action are specialized in several different laws, such as the Framework Act on Women's Development, Act on Equal Employment and Support for Work-Family Reconciliation, and the National Human Rights Commission Act. Article 6 of the Framework Act on Women's Development states that for the attainment of sustainable gender equality through the promotion of women's participation in the field in which participation by women noticeably increase, the state and the local government may take affirmative action within the reasonable scope. Affirmative action are implemented in various fields. In the government administration, there is a women quota in government committees, which require at least 40% of women in the government committees. The gender-friendly employment system, which requires employment of additional public officials when fewer than 30% of successful applicants in entrance examination are male or females. The public sector is also required to have at least one female officer in the manager level. Mandatory nomination quota for women and the financial support for nominated women are implemented in the political field. In the education field, certain numbers of women must be included with forming a personal committee in national and public universities. The target system that requires every nation and the public universities to set the employment rate of female faculty members every 3 years. In the field of employment, from 2007, all business hiring more than 500 employees but lacking enough number of women managers are required to establish their own plans for implementing affirmative actions and to implement the plan. Series of recent violent sex crimes against women or children have drawn attention in recent years. Thus, the legislation for the prevention of sex crime and support programs for victims have been put in place at a rapid pace. Act on the Prevention of Sexual Assault and Protection of Victims thereof was enacted in 1994, and it addressed sexual offenses by relative sexual offenses on the disabled and sexual offenses in public place, in addition to the general sexual offenses addressed by the criminal law. This act is viewed with significance because it articulated the duty of the state to prepare the victim support programs as well as publishing offenders. Through various amendments and in consideration of the special nature of sexual crime cases, a special office was created in the court system to handle sex crime cases. Sex crimes are also handled by specially trained police officers and prosecutors. In 2010, a legislation system aimed at public disclosure of adult sexual offenders legislation was established and began to be implemented. Recently, as a result of the serious, heinous sex crime on minors and the disabled, a new law was enacted that requires offenders to wear electronic monitoring devices, although legislation allowing hormone treatment to statutory rapists and sexual deviant has also been enacted. Act on the Prevention of Domestic Violence and the Protection of Victims was enacted in 1997. It mandated emergency measures, temporary protective measure, and protective disposition during the phase of police investigation and the prosecutor's protection, and it allows domestic violence to be dealt as family protection cases, not as criminal cases. The law was amended to give victims the legal right to file for court order for victim protection, including temporary protective measures. In light of significant increase of women's participation in economic activities, various laws related to work-life balance and child rearing support were enacted. Infant Care Act was introduced in 1991, explicitly recognizing the responsibility of government and society relating to child caring. This act requires the establishment of daycare centers in workplaces with more than 500 employees in total, over 300 female employees. Act on the equal employment of both sexes guarantees maternity leave of 90 days for women before and after childbirth. 2001, parental leave was expanded to include parental leave. In addition, in order to promote work-life balance, reduction of working hours during child-infant period was implemented, and the family-friendly index and certificate programs for business were introduced to create family-friendly corporate environment. Lastly, I will discuss the legal and institutional basis in Korea achieve gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming was taken as a main objective in women-related policies at the First World Congress on Women that took place in Beijing, 1995. Since then, the Korean government also has undertaken to build the legal and institutional basis to realize the gender mainstreaming. Some of the prominent outcomes of these efforts are gender-sensitive assessment to analyze how policies will affect women and men differently, gender-sensitive budget to review the effect on women and women when assessing budgets implement policies, gender-sensitive statistics to separate men and women in every government-approved official statistics. This trend resulted in the enactment of the Act on Gender Sensitivity Assessment and Analysis in 2011, which mandates gender-sensitive assessment in every enhancement and amendment of laws and in governmental plans and programs. Article 10 of the Framework Act on Women's Development provides that the state and the local government must, in the process of developing and implementing policies under their jurisdiction, in advance analyze and assess effect of such policies on women's rights and interests, women's participation in society, etc. Now let's look at the practice example of change in governmental policies as a result of gender sensitivity assessment. An illustrated example is one concerning the city of Seoul installed diaper boards in men's public restrooms in order to make it possible for toddlers to go to bathroom with daddy. Regulation pursuant to the Act on Public Health and Medical Service Act is another example of gender sensitivity assessment on law and regulations. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family conducted gender sensitivity assessment to the amendment of these regulations and required that gender and age distribution must be assessed when planning public health service and designating the poor health care service areas. Another example is the regulation pursuant to Public Health and Medical Service Act, which required that gender and age distribution must be taken into consideration when planning the service and designating the poor health care service areas. It's the same. Now I will wrap up my presentation by briefly mentioning the tasks that lie ahead of us in Korea. The significant strides made in Korea gender policies are not reflected in the daily lives of women. This reflects the disparity between law and practice. If gender mainstreaming is adopted in decision-making processes, legal efficiency will also be achieved through change of social values. I would like to point out some of the gender policies that should be included in future legislative endeavors. First, gender-related laws should be properly enforced for efficacy. There are a variety of gender-related law in both areas, yet there is a wide gap between the legal system and the reality. Gender-related laws are often created in haste before major election to win female vote, and they are integrated, insufficient in substance. These loopholes must be filled with adequate provisions and institutions after thoughtful consideration. Gender education should be provided to lawmakers and public officials to increase their awareness of gender issues. Secondly, various methods and tools should be taken to achieve gender equality in work-life balance, and child-rearing society must be built. Long working hours should be reduced promptly, and policies to induce men to participate in child care must be established. Thirdly, laws should be amended or revised to provide support for various types of family, such as multicultural family, single-parent family, elderly women family, etc. Lastly, laws and policies designed alleviated on the representation of women in various spheres of life should be enacted. Affirmative actions should be applied to increase representation of women in political, economical, social, and cultural fields. In short, gender policies should aim to reduce the gap between the legal system and the real world, and to ensure that all women are covered by the protection of gender policies. In conclusion, development of gender policies and efforts to achieve gender equality in Korea can be described as follows. First, pre-existing laws that had discriminatory effect on gender, such as family law, were repealed. Second, laws providing for affirmative action to overcome past discrimination were enacted. Third, laws and regulations to achieve gender mainstreaming in areas such as budget, education, and statistics were enacted, and these laws and regulations require gender-sensitive policies. As government offices and agencies are now required to formulate and comply with concert policies and regulations aimed at achieving gender mainstreaming, we can expect that there will be a lot of changes in the life of women and men. I believe the task that is ahead of us is to more research to understand the impact of this change in our society. Thank you for your attention.